You are listening to an episode of Megan is Not a Parent, But. Today's episode is brought to you by my Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass are 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. You can start today at bekindcoaching.com/classpass. In today's episode, we'll be chatting about how your emotions are giving you messages. So I invite you to get cozy, grab your notebook, and let's dig in. Welcome to Megan is Not a Parent, But, the podcast where I, your host, Megan Ford, former early childhood educator turned positive parenting coach, helps parents just like you learn how to deal with your strong-willed child's difficult behavior. I've been described from my clients as a blend between Brene Brown and Miss Frizzle, you know, the one from the Magic School Bus. I help bring awareness and hold space for the hard conversations and make big concepts like behavior and relationships and temperaments easy to understand and easy to implement. If you're a parent who struggles with your child's loud, dramatic, disruptive, over-the-top behavior, but don't think a parenting coach would help you because those are just for the bad parent or those parents, then this episode is especially for you. I invite you to grab a journal, cozy blanket, a warm beverage, and enjoy what you're about to explore. Before we get started, I want to share 2 disclaimers. One, they are repaving the road right outside my window. So if you hear the beeps of the trucks or if you hear some jackhammering, which I'm hoping doesn't happen, but if it happens, I'm just going to keep going and invite you to practice focusing your attention, which ironically is something we're talking about today, back into this message. The second is I wanted to call out a community member and Clear and Kind Parent member, Tisha. And Tisha once described me as a blend between Brene Brown and Miss Frizzle. And today, in today's episode, that really shines a light. It really is apparent to me inside of this episode. So I invite you to stay open, take notes, notice the things that come up, and give yourself permission that if this does not make sense at first, that's okay. That this episode will be here, that you can pause, you can rewind, you can come back to it time and time again. But I took this as an invitation to just nerd out a little bit, and it made me super happy. So I hope that you enjoy it as well. All right, so we are building off of last week's episode talking about no bad emotions. And so we can come to a place to say, now that we all agree that emotions have purpose, now the question that comes up is like, well, what's the purpose? Like if they all are valid, if there's no good emotions, if there's no bad emotions, emotions are just there to give us information and data. Now we can think about like, what is the purpose? And I'll tell you just clean and dirty. I'll rip off the Band-Aid. We don't even have to work for it. I'll tell you the purpose of them. Our emotions have messages. They deliver us messages, and those messages influence our behavior. And we're going to unpack. I'm going to start at the end here, just give it to you outright. And then we're just going to deconstruct this more so that you can learn how I got there, how I get to this message, how I've refined this message, and how you can step into this process of doing this work for yourself. So when we look at emotions, remember last week we talked about how emotions are those big buckets and the feelings are what fills those big buckets, and that we all have them. So when we think about experiencing happiness, happiness is the message there is pleasure. And when we experience sadness, the message is loss. When we feel anger, it's a breach of power. Annoyance is needing attention. Fear is awareness of threat. Hurt, that there's pain present. And guilt is that we violated our values. Those are just messages of the top 6 that I thought of my head. But if we were to take all of our emotions and really focus on bringing our intelligence, awareness to, we could find the message out for anything that we're experiencing. And I found that when we find out what that message is, it invites us to connect and work in alignment with our behavior, right? So something that we talk about often here is that our behavior is communication. Our behavior is communicating our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs. So when I'm feeling happy, guess what my behavior is? I enjoy it. I'm like, woohoo, I celebrate it. When I'm feeling sad and I have a sense of loss, my behavior is to grieve. Anger, that breach of power, my behavior then is that I do work to become empowered. When I'm annoyed, that invites me to take the behavior to involve and include, spend some time there giving attention in powerful ways. Fear guides my behavior to establish safety. Hurt guides my behavior to take care of the wound. And guilt invites me into repair work. So now, how did I get here? How can I'm like, wow, that's so clean and easy? Well, let me tell you, it was a long journey to get here, and it is a long journey to come back here. And it's this balance of listening to, becoming in touch with, developing my emotional intelligence and my emotional maturity. And now we're going to deconstruct how I got here. So we're going to talk a lot today, and we're going to zone in on what is called the triangle of human experience. And this triangle is a framework that was created by Dr. Daniel Siegel. He is the author of The Whole Brain Child. He is the author of Parenting from the Inside Out, and he's a huge influence to myself and my work. And what we're going to specifically dig into is the differences between the brain and the mind. That's what we're going to really, like my little Miss Frizzle, like, come on, everybody, let's go on an adventure. We're going to take a deep look into our mind and what our mind controls and what our mind does, and the purpose of zoning in on here so that we can start to learn what these messages are saying to us. You may remember that I mentioned Dan Siegel too when we're talking about the 3 brain states, right? The am I safe? Am I connected? What am I learning? That too is a model of his that I use in my work. And today we're going to dig into his model of mine. So we can think about the brain as the hardware, and our brain develops, it grows and it develops. And when we think about mind, the mind is the software. So the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software. And what a mind does is that it matures. And the mind sits at the top of Dan Siegel's triangle of human experience. So I'm going to walk us through this triangle model. So if we think about the mind is at the top of the triangle, the lower right hand is the relationship, and the lower left hand is the brain. And finding this flow of mind, relationship, and brain all together is harnessing our energy and our flow of energy. Dan Siegel talks a lot about becoming integrated or becoming connected. And what this means is that all of this energy is in flow in a harmonious and easy way. That the harmony is that energy is flowing freely and easily between our mind and our brain and our relationship. So when we're talking about mind, the mind has a purpose. The mind is the regulation of energy flow. So if we're thinking about all of the energy in our body, all of the energy that exists within us and others, the mind is what helps regulate the flow. It helps regulate this flow by monitoring and regulating our mental activities. So our mind is in control over our mood. It's in control over our thoughts. It's in control over our memory, our hope, problem solving, dreams, and consciousness. Our mind is something that is unique to us, and it is something that helps us, again, connect to others, connect to ourselves, and connect to our greater world. When we describe relationship, what relationship does with energy is that it is the sharing of energy flow. So when we're thinking about relationship to ourselves and to each other, it's the relationship is highlighting the connection between it. Like, what is that connection between you and something else? It could be between you and yourself. It could be between you and your partner. It could be the relationship between you and your own parents. And then, of course, in this work that we do together is really focusing in on the relationship between the parent and the child, you and your child. This reminds me of an earlier episode when we were talking about that the relationship between a parent and a child is asymmetrical, or it's imbalanced by design. When we think about symmetrical relationships and asymmetrical relationships, we're talking about the balance of power. How are we harnessing the power of that energy between two people or two bodies? We can also think about the relationship, our intrapersonal relationship. We talked about this as communication, our nonverbal communication. Our intrapersonal relationship is the relationship we have with ourselves. Like when we get very quiet, like what are our thoughts? What are our relationships? How do we treat ourselves when we feel good? How do we treat ourselves when we feel bad? How are those ways of talking to ourselves, and are we even aware of that? And then we also can take a look at our interpersonal relationships, meaning between you and other people. Like I said, between you and your own parents, between you and your children, between you and your friends. We can start to assess all of those different relationships. And then the final corner of the triangle of human experience is the brain. And the brain is the embodiment of energy flow. And when we're talking about the brain, we're talking about the embodied brain here. It means our whole body, all of our different body parts, our stomach, right? Our gut, our legs, our heart, our lungs, all of our different body parts. It's also talking about the organ of the brain, like what's in our head, our central knowledge center, that organ that's in our skull. And it's also talking about our neural systems. And our neural systems are like the super highway that connects it all together, much like our nervous system, right? If you've heard nervous system, you're familiar with our neural systems. It's the ways that creates all of that communication to our entire being. So when we think about our triangle of human experience, we're thinking about the mind, right? The movement, the regulation of the energy, the relationships, which is the sharing of that energy, and the brain, which is the embodiment of that energy. So what we're going to really zone in now is really today's episode and today's message about, again, listening to our emotions and listening to the message of our emotions. We're going to really zone in on one of those aspects, which is the mind. So we're going to come on, everybody, let's jump into the mind. So when we're thinking about specifically the mind, there are 4 facets of the mind. And a facet you can think about as a side, like a diamond. A diamond is a faceted gemstone. Or if you have a polished sapphire ring, it probably has many facets, which are those little angles, meaning you can see one thing and then you're looking at it from all different sides. So the 4 facets of mind, the 4 sides of mind, are our consciousness, which is the experience of being aware. Why is this important? Because it influences how we process information. That's why I say awareness is always the first step. Let's get very aware with what's going on. Let's bring awareness to this work, which really means let's take something that was in a blind spot or unconscious, we were unaware of it, and let's bring it to consciousness. Let's shed some light on it and gain awareness of it. Another facet of our mind is our subjective experience. And subjective experience means, what is it that you experience? Here we can start to think about the felt texture of our lived lives. How did we experience something and how did someone else experience something? It's not, it is something that is unique to us, meaning no one else has your lived experience. No one else has your subjective experience. And that happens in our mind. The third facet is information processing and cognition. And when we're talking about this happens often it just happens with awareness or without awareness, right? Are we conscious to the way that we process information and the way that we think, and do we have awareness of our thoughts, or is that happening in the background and we are not aware of it? So it's how you take in that information, how our consciousness processes that information, and then how does that information then impact how we show up? And the final facet of mind here is that the mind is emergent and self-organizing. And what this means is that it is creating itself while it's happening. So when you have an experience, a subjective experience, when you go through something, your mind starts to create a story around it, and that story impacts how you show up in it. And that process is always happening. Dan Siegel likes to describe this as like watching a cloud. A cloud is an emergent and self-organizing thing. You can watch it that it creates itself from itself, and it's always cycling that process. So same with us and same with our mind. Our mind is always emerging and then self-organizing. So if we are now going one layer deeper into the facet of mind, what we're going to zone in next to is really zoning in on the facet of mind that navigates our information processing and our cognition. I hope you're still with me. I hope that this isn't too much. I trust that we're like, okay, all right, we're tracking. Now that we're talking about information processing and cognition, we understand that it's the mind. We understand that the mind is different than the body, and it's different than the relationships, and it's one of the key pillars of our human experience. So we're digging now into information processing and cognition. And when we're here in this little boat, we can start to think about inside of this facet. We can break it down further into motivation. We can break it down into attention, and we can break it down into emotion. So we're thinking about these three pillars. Motivation, it influences where we focus. In the work that we do, we talk about motivation in terms of external motivation, which is outside motivation, or internal motivation, intrinsic motivation, which is that internal space. So why we want to remove fear-based bribes and punishments and shame is that it offers a lot of external motivation. It is something that is outside of them. We either guide them with a carrot or we prod them with fire, right? Then their focus is on getting away or getting the thing. It's not about doing the thing. So when we shift and bring more internal motivation, that's when we start to see children show up because they want to do it, because they have influence, they have internal influence about where they focus their time and, more importantly, their energy. When we think about breaking down attention, attention now is the direction of energy. So where are they placing their attention? Where are you placing your attention right now? And we can check, are you single focusing? Like, is your attention focusing right here, or are we splitting our attention? Are we doing a task while listening to this? Are we driving and listening? That means that our attention is split. It's the direction of which we are investing our energy. And finally, now we can dig into emotion, and emotion is what influences our attention. Brain break moment. All right, I know that I can go deep way fast. So let's just take a pause here to take a deep breath in and let it out. And listen while I let you know that this episode is brought to you by me, Megan, and my Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass are 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. Those classes include Positive Parenting 101, which is a class that is just designed to give you the first steps in what positive parenting is and what it is not. Second class is Emotional Validation. In this class, we dig into how can we show up to have your child feel seen and heard in their lived experience. The third class is Setting Boundaries, all about communicating, enforcing, and allowing testing of your secure and consistent and firm boundaries. The fourth class is a class called Ending Entitlement. Inside of this class, we dig into how we are showing up using tools of entitlement and how we can start to release those tools and begin practicing tools of empowerment and choice. And we know that what we put down, they're going to pick up. The fifth class is a class all about natural consequences. This is a class that gets very clear, and you'll walk away knowing what an imposed consequence is, what a logical consequence is, and most importantly, how to begin utilizing natural consequences so your children begin learning from their lived experience. And the final class is a class all about apologizing. I like to say that connection is the most skipped over step and recovery is the least utilized step. So in that step, you'll start to learn how to show up and use impactful and effective apologies so that your child knows that you see them and hear them and care about them. If you are looking to begin your journey today, then I highly encourage you go to bekindcoaching.com/classpass and dig into the classes starting today. As my free gift, you will receive Raising Respectful Kids, which is my 3-part video series all about how to stop focusing on adding on more decorations to your child and to you and to your relationship, and instead starting to reinforce and build a solid and secure foundation together. I can't wait to hear all of your amazing wins from the steps that you take inside of Positive Parenting Class Pass. All right, ready to get back to our episode? Before we get back, let's take one more deep breath together. And take a deep breath in and let it out. And let's go. What this means is that when we can pay attention to our emotions, when we become emotionally intelligent and more emotionally mature, that means that we can have a more empowered influence on our attention and on our motivation. We can dig now into emotion by understanding emotion as sensing, observing, and interpreting. If you are new to me, those terms you may never heard those terms before, and we're going to get into the definition, but I'm hopeful that if you have been in spaces that I hold, if you have been in this work with me, that those words are like, now we get it. Now, wait a second, here's those words again. And we're going to get into that. Those words really come up in a key place where I invite everybody to practice each and every week. So if we break down now emotion further, that's where we're going to go into. We're going to talk about sensing emotion. And sensing emotions come with the experience and the feelings. What are the sensations in our body? Like, what is it that it feels like in your body when you feel anger? For me, I feel like my fists tighten. I can sense that. I can feel it. I can feel my cheeks get flushed. I can feel like my jaw clench a little bit. Those are the things that I'm sensing in my body that my emotion is guiding and influencing. When we're talking about observing, now we're talking about observing, which is just witnessing and collecting data. I can observe that my fists are tight. I can observe that my jaw is clenched. I can feel the pressure that's building inside of me. I can feel the heat in my body. I can even sometimes feel the sweat. Those are all observations on the things that my body is sensing. It's alerting me to. And then we can dig into our interpretation. And interpretation is all about how we make sense of it. What is the story attached here? What is it that it's telling us to do? And if we've never slowed down to pay attention to what are we observing and then what are we interpreting from that observation, we can start taking action on something that gets us to a place that we were not hopeful for, right? It can lead us into misinterpreting behaviors and misinterpreting those messages and misinterpreting those signals, and then start acting out of alignment. So think about if I was a person who was sensing anger in my body, I could observe my fists. And what if someone else who was observing my fists interpreted it as aggressive? How would that guide how they show up? What is it that I need in that moment when I'm starting to feel anger and I'm starting to clench my fist? And that's where we start to get mixed signals. We start to act in a way that starts to become a stressor in a situation that is already stressful to the person experiencing it. Things can get way messy if we leave our interpretations unchecked, especially when it relates to our own difficult behavior and others' difficult behavior. I hope the keys that I was alluding to earlier about if you've been here, maybe some of these terms come up, that we practice this each and every week. Each and every week inside of the Facebook community is where you can watch the replay, and inside of TikTok and on my Instagram stories, I pull 3 cards. It's a practice called Monday Intentions. I've been doing this practice for years, probably close to 4 years, every Monday, pulling the same 3 cards in the same successive pattern. And it's a way to invite everyone in the community into the practice of observation and interpretation. Cards is a fabulous practice of this, and we practice the skills that we want to use this. So we practice these skills each and every week. I pull up these cards, we see the messages, we read the words, we decipher them together, we interpret them together, and we do this as a way to start becoming self-reflective. And what I mean by that is self-reflective is when we see something and it's being mirrored back to us, we are inviting this sensation, we are inviting this observation, we're inviting this interpretation. We're doing this in a place that we feel safe so that we can start to practice these skills and bring it into situations that feel like a threat. We practice observation and interpretation so then we can take it into spaces of real life application. We can start to take it into the moments of a tantrum or meltdown in the middle of Target. We can now slow down and be like, what am I sensing? What am I observing? What am I interpreting? We can start connecting to our emotions. We can start connecting to those messages that are being sent to us from our body to say, hey, focus attention here. All of your energy is here, so that then we can start making informed and empowered decisions. We do this work because the children in your care, the children in your home, it's often said that children are mirrors, and they are. They are picking up every tool that you place down. They pick up everything that they see around them in their own subjective experience, in their own lived experience. They're constantly picking up things, and then they mirror it back to us. And a mistake that I've seen many make is that we focus on changing behavior. And in my world, I believe that that's like trying to change the mirror. We're like, hey, whoa, I don't like that reflection you're showing me. I need you to change. And then children start contorting, right? They're like, oh, do you like this image? Do you like this? And they start doing things to make the adult happy, to make the adult comfortable, to make the adult stand down. And that's a lot. That's a lot of work. And I think if we were to connect back to our values, I don't think that that's work that we want, that we don't want that outcome. We want the inverse of that. We want connection. We want safety. We want security. We want children to feel unconditional love. We want children to know that no matter who they are or what they do, they have a safe, soothing, secure caregiver with them. And in order to get that outcome, in order for that to be your child's lived experience, that means that it's, oof, that's big work for us to get very clear that we are starting to learn from our reflection. And that's part of breaking the cycle. It's becoming empowered in those messages that our emotions are giving us by becoming aware of the stories we say to ourselves, becoming aware of those moments that we are feeling threat, that we are feeling triggered into defense, by becoming aware of what's going on and bringing consciousness to it so that we can take it out of the dark. We can take it out of those blind sides. And I think for me, this process really came down to, again, building my emotional intelligence and strengthening my emotional maturity. Because for me, I had a lot of old messages tied to emotions. So for me, my old message of happiness was safety, right? Maybe you feel that way too, or have felt that way too. That happy was the goal. I want to be happy. I need to get to happy. I need to make others happy. Everything centered around happiness. Because for me, if everybody was happy, that meant I was safe. That was the message that happiness brought me. And how did that change my behavior? I started to only accept happy, and I only sought out happy. Anything outside of happy was danger, threat. For sadness, ooh, that was bad. That was bad. Do not feel sad. If I were to experience sad, I can laugh at it now because I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. It's like a nervous anger laughter that comes up here, because for sad was bad. And what that guided me to do was hide. If I felt sad about something, ooh, nope, hide it, tuck it away. Nope. That is bad. Bad is threat. Anger for a long time was dangerous. And when I held on to that message, I would avoid anger. I would repress it. I would stuff it down. I would get so resentful. I started to hold on and attach to that because my goal was happy. I was seeking happiness. When I was annoyed at something, that that old message was unwanted. Something that was annoyance was, oh, I did not want it. So guess what I did? I ignored it. I think about this in like my first cell phone bill. And I was like in college. I had just been like out on my own as like, I think I was 18, 19, got a cell phone for the first time. And I was in charge of paying the bill. And then like, oops, I didn't pay the bill. And then the notice came and I was like, oh, annoyance. I would just ignore it. Right? Like, oh, this is unwanted. No. Just put it away, hide it. Just look a different way. I laugh at my old self. I'm like, oh, you were surviving so hard, Megan, and I love you for it. My old message for fear was avoid. Avoid fear. Fear was overwhelming. It was scary. And when that happened, I would numb. I would distract myself. I would look away. I would try to tone it down because it was something that was so painful that I was like, nope, no way, Jose. My old message of hurt was fault. I was to blame for the hurt because there had to be someone to blame for it. And if I was hurt by someone else, then I would assign blame and find fault with them as well. And what did that lead me to do? Was to activate defenses, mine and others. I would just get triggered, find the fault, and then go to defend it, which often led to guilt. And when it was guilt, that was actually my experience there was shame. Instead of thinking I did something and I need to repair it, I believed that I was something, and then I went to go freeze. This blocked me from asking for help. This blocked me from releasing. This blocked me from healing. This blocked me from growth. This kept me stuck, repeating cycles over and over and over again. And it wasn't until I slowed down again and said, Let me start to listen to these messages. Let me get into spaces that invite me to listen to these messages, that I could reinterpret those and get more in alignment with the true message, the message that is rooted not in fear, but in love of what my emotions had for me. Then I could get realigned back to what I said before. Now happy is connected to pleasure. It means, ooh, I like this. I get to enjoy it. I want to celebrate it. Sadness is loss. When I lose something, now I can naturally grieve. I can release it. I can think back and be like, wow, I love this. I can cherish it. Anger now, again, is that breach of power. It's a signal say, boop, set the boundary, Megan. We're crossing boundaries. We need to get back into alignment. I now have become best friends with my anger. Just like I said a couple podcasts ago, talking about how anger and growth are BFFs. They're best friends. Now, annoyance, again, needing intention, it invites me to say, ooh, let me pay attention here. Let me focus here. Let me involve myself and include others so that this thing that keeps happening stops happening. That fear, my fear now has the message of that threat. When I start to feel scared, now I'm like, ooh, something's going on here. I'm feeling like, where's the threat? Is it a real threat? Is it a false threat? I now listen to those threat responses, like we talked about in episodes past when we talked about what is a fight response, what is a flight response, what is a fawn response, and what is a freeze response. I said this out of order, but I can start to say like, ooh, I'm triggered into threat. So now I can lean into my goal here. My behavior is, how can I establish safety? I start to listen to those messages. I start to focus in on, where is my attention going? What is my energy saying? What is my mind? What are the stories in my mind? What is my experience? When I feel hurt now I can go to say, oh, I'm hurt because there's pain present. Is it a physical pain? Is it an emotional pain? What is the pain? So that I can take care of the wound. I can treat what's going on. I can lean in and say, hey, what would make this better for myself and others? And now guilt again, connected to violating values, it's an invitation for me to get back in alignment with my values. I no longer don't think that I am a bad person. I think I did a bad thing. And now I want to go back and I want to repair. I care so much about the relationship that I'm going to go back and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to make amends. And I'm going to do the things that stop the harmful behavior so that I don't continue to make the mistake over and over and over again. I think it's important here to think about this now that we've talked about emotions and we've talked about the purpose of them, and we've connected back into saying, okay, now I get it. Now I understand it. I'm going to share again the questions that I shared last week. I'm going to ask you, are you doing your part? Are you becoming present to them, to your emotions? Are you attuning to them? Are you showing up in ways that resonate with yourself and others? Are you doing your part to establish trust within yourself and with others? This week on in a lot of my lives, or in a lot of different spaces, we've talked a lot about connecting back to your answer, that you know what's best for you, connecting back to your inner guidance, connecting back to your inner wisdom, and finding spaces that reflect that back to you, that no one else has the answer of what is right for you other than you. There are ways to help connect back, to formulate that process. There's spaces that can hold you accountable to doing that work, that can invite you into spaces of awareness, spaces of consciousness. But connecting back to, am I doing my part, is connecting back, am I doing my part to come back to me, to establish my triangle of human experience? The next two questions is, what does it feel like now when I'm safe? What does it feel like now when I'm not safe? What are our messages popping up here? And are we in tune with them? Are we listening to them? Are we interpreting those messages correctly? And then the final question are, what are the signs in my child? That is a powerful space to consider. Once we can learn and hold the signs in us, then the natural invitation is to hold it in them and reflect it back for them. All right, friends, I am so grateful that you were here. That's where we're going to end today, talking through not only what are those messages that are coming up, but more importantly, how we got there. Understanding that this is layered work. There's so much that we can unpack and dig into. But I'm proud of you for showing up today. I'm proud of you for digging into this work today. And proud of you for showing up exactly where you are. Thank you for being here. Now, I want to know, what did you take from this episode? I would love for you to show your work. What is it that you're working on? What is it that you've taken from these small bite-sized lessons each and every week? I say small and bite-sized, but today was anything but small or bite-sized. But I want to know about it. I love hearing about what actions you take from these episodes. And there's 3 ways that you can do that. You can do that from leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can share your thoughts and takeaways on social media and tag me. And you can share your thoughts inside of our dedicated posts, inside of our Facebook community, Positive Parenting with Maggie Ann Ford. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for staying to the end. My mission in life is to help support parents feel supported and empowered in doing this work. This podcast, my Facebook community, and my programs and book club all help parents work through the phases of awareness, education, and practice. And if you are ready to take the next step, I encourage you to check out Positive Parenting 101. This is the first class of my ClassPass series. And inside this 45-minute class, you'll learn more about what positive parenting is and isn't, so that you can start putting down those tools with negative impacts and replace them with positive parenting tools. You can start today at bekindcoaching.com/ClassPass. And as my free gift to you, you will receive Raising Respectful Kids, which is a 3-part video series that helps focus on the foundations of building a balanced and secure relationship and foundation for you and your child. Thank you for being here. Thank you for going on this journey with me. And I cannot wait to see you next time. Bye, friends.